Welcome to Crisis in Perception, where we examine the systems shaping our world. This episode explores Future Crimes by Marc Goodman as a systems-level analysis of how hyperconnectivity, data extraction, and weak digital security architectures reshape crime, surveillance, and institutional vulnerability.
And our mission for you on this deep dive is to unpack what is honestly a deeply unsettling paradox. The central premise we're looking at today is this idea that the more convenience we build into our digital lives, the more invisible attack surfaces we create.
Right.
So what looks like this frictionless, amazing progress for you, the user, actually serves as massive leverage for criminals, states, and markets. It's this interconnected system where your home, your phone, your car, your hospital, your identity, they're all tied to the exact same information grid.
Which is incredibly efficient.
Right. It creates enormous efficiencies, but it also concentrates risk to an unprecedented degree.
So to really understand what that abstract concentration of risk looks like in reality, we need to look at a specific case. There's this story about a technology writer named Matt Honan. Now, you would naturally assume a tech writer, someone who literally covers this industry for a living, would have their digital defenses completely locked down.
You'd think so.
But in the summer of 2012, a hacker who went by the alias Phobia just systematically dismantled Honan's entire digital life. And when I say dismantled, I mean utterly irreparably destroyed.
It's a fascinating case study specifically because of how seemingly mundane the methodology was. I mean, people often imagine hacking as some highly sophisticated brute force algorithm breaking uncrackable military-grade encryption.
Like in the movies.
Exactly, but that is rarely how it works in practice. In Honan's case, it was just the exploitation of interconnected convenience. The hacker simply used the rules of the system exactly as they were designed.
Right, and here's where the mechanics of it are just terrifying. Phobia didn't start with some dark web hacking tool. He started with Honan's personal website, just a regular public-facing website. From there, Phobia looked up the WHOIS domain record.
Which is totally public.
Completely. For anyone unfamiliar, WHOIS is basically a public directory for the internet. When you register a website, your contact info goes in there unless you pay to hide it. So Phobia uses this public record to find Honan's physical address and his Gmail address. Then, Phobia took a guess. He guessed that Honan, like pretty much everyone else on Earth, had an Amazon account.
A very safe bet.
Yeah. So armed with just a name, an email, and a mailing address, this hacker called Amazon Customer Service.
And this is a classic example of social engineering. The vulnerability here isn't a line of code, it's the human element. The hacker manipulated a customer service representative whose primary incentive, which is dictated by Amazon's business model, is to be helpful.
Right, to get you off the phone quickly and happy.
To resolve issues quickly, to reduce friction for the customer, the system is designed to default to trust.
So the hacker smooth talks this Amazon rep, pretending to be Honan, and manages to get the rep to reveal the last 4 digits of the credit card on file. Now you might be thinking, what can a hacker do with just the last 4 digits? They can't buy anything.
They didn't want to buy anything.
No. At the time, Apple's iCloud security protocols use those exact same 4 digits as a verification tool to prove your identity and reset a password.
It's a daisy chain of trust. Apple assumed that if you knew those 4 digits, you must be the authorized user.
Exactly. So Phobia calls Apple, gives them the 4 credit card digits he just got from Amazon, and just like that, he is handed the keys to Honan's iCloud. From the iCloud, he triggers a password reset for Honan's Gmail account. And once you have the primary email account that serves as the backup for everything else in your life,
It's game over.
it's completely game over. Phobia wiped Honan's iPhone, wiped his iPad, wiped his MacBook. Years of digital memories, including the only existing photos of his young daughter's first year of life, were entirely, permanently gone.
It is just a devastating sequence of events, but the detail that truly highlights the absurdity of our digital incentive architecture is the motive. You really have to ask, what was the underlying reason for this total digital annihilation?
Was it extortion?
Right. Was it financial extortion? Was it a personal vendetta?
That's the part that's so chilling. It was neither. Honan eventually managed to communicate with this attacker online. He essentially asked, "Why me? What did I do to you?" And Phobia revealed it wasn't personal at all. He literally told Honan he didn't have any heat towards him. He just liked Honan's Twitter username.
Just the handle.
Yeah. Because Honan was an early adopter, he had a rare, prized 3-letter Twitter handle. It was @MAT. In certain underground communities, short social media handles carry massive social cachet. The hacker wanted it. The total destruction of a decade of Honen's personal data and irreplaceable family photos was nothing more than collateral damage in a heist to steal a screen name.
If we step back and connect this to the bigger picture, Honen's security architecture represents what we can call a digital Maginot Line.
Oh, the World War I thing.
Right, well, post-World War I.
Hmm.
Historically, the Maginot Line was this massive, highly advanced, static defensive structure built by the French. They poured enormous resources into it, assuming any future war would be fought head-on. But when World War II arrived, the adversaries simply drove their tanks around it through the Ardennes forest. The defense proved entirely useless because it relied on a flawed assumption about how the attack would happen.
And in the digital realm, our defenses are exactly like that. We build these massive passwords with special characters and numbers, thinking that is the wall. But the whole thing is a house of cards built on self-referential trust between connected accounts.
Exactly. Amazon trusts the home address, Apple trusts the Amazon data, Gmail trusts the Apple email.
It's an overlapping self-referential web of purported trust. And when everything is connected, everyone is vulnerable.
Precisely. We are building our lives on an infrastructure where convenience is prioritized over resilience.
So as we dive into this today, I want you, the listener, to do a quick mental inventory of your own connected accounts. Think about your email, your social media, your banking apps, your online shopping profiles. How many of them use the exact same password? Or, even more critically, how many use the exact same recovery email address?
Because that's the linchpin.
Right. Because as we embark on this analysis of the systemic design failures of our modern information grid, you're going to see how your own perfectly rational pursuit of convenience might be building your very own digital Maginot Line.
Which brings us to a fundamental concept we really need to understand to grasp the sheer scale of the vulnerability we're dealing with here. We need to talk about Moore's Law.
Okay.
Now, most people understand Moore's Law in the context of consumer electronics. It's the observation, originally made by Gordon Moore in 1965, that computing power roughly doubles every 18 to 24 months, while the relative cost of that computing power drops. It's why the smartphone in your pocket has vastly more computing power than the computers that guided the Apollo missions to the moon.
But wait, usually when we talk about Moore's Law, we're celebrating. We're talking about better graphics, faster internet, AI breakthroughs.
And that is the crucial blind spot. Moore's Law is a mathematically neutral force. The exponential doubling of computing power helps a medical researcher sequence DNA twice as fast, yes, but it also helps a criminal crack your password encryption twice as fast. It applies equally to innovation and to crime. And to really understand the implications of this, we have to look at how the nature of robbery has evolved. Because historically, crime has always struggled with one major business problem, and that is scalability.
Scalability, meaning how much crime you can commit in a given amount of time.
Exactly. For millennia, the business model of robbery was highly constrained by physical reality and geography. A mugger waiting in a dark alley could realistically only rob a very limited number of people in a single day.
Right.
Let's say 5 or 6 victims, if they were particularly industrious and the foot traffic was heavy. The startup costs were low, just a weapon and an alleyway. But the revenue ceiling was strictly capped by time and physical presence. You can only hold up one person at a time.
Right, but then the industrial age happens, and technology suddenly provides an answer to the criminal scalability problem. The locomotive is invented. Now, obviously, the inventors of the train weren't thinking about facilitating crime. They were thinking about progress, commerce, mass transportation.
But criminal entrepreneurs foresaw the opportunity immediately. People like Jesse James or Bill Miner.
Exactly. They recognized that the technology changed the paradigm. Thanks to the locomotive, an armed gunman didn't have to wait in an alley for a single pedestrian. They could stop a train in the middle of nowhere and rob 300 people all at once. The technology allowed the crime to scale. The victims were conveniently aggregated into one easily targeted container.
And that linear progression leads us directly into the digital age. But here's the critical difference. In the digital realm, the scaling is no longer linear. It is exponential.
Walk me through that.
To use a classic illustration, if you take 30 steps linearly across your living room, you travel maybe 30 meters. But if you take 30 steps exponentially, meaning you double the distance with each step, so 1 meter, 2 meters, 4, 8, 16, by the time you take your 30th step, you have traveled a distance equal to 26 times around the Earth.
Or all the way to the moon. That is a staggering visualization.
When criminals apply exponential technology to theft, they stop robbing hundreds of people and start robbing millions. They don't need a horse or a gun. Today, a single hack initiated by a small team or even an individual, can compromise tens of millions of people simultaneously, from thousands of miles away across international borders.
Let's look at what that exponential scale actually looks like in practice. Take the TJ Maxx data breach from a while back. Hackers managed to infiltrate their systems and steal the financial data of 94 million customers. 94 million.
It's incredible scale.
Or look at the Sony PlayStation Network hack, which compromised 77 million accounts. Credit card numbers, names, addresses, birth dates, gaming logins, all of it extracted in a flash.
This phenomenon is what we can define as the crime singularity. It is a vital threshold to understand if we are going to accurately assess our current reality.
Let's break that down. What exactly makes it a singularity?
The crime singularity is the point where technological complexity and criminal capability accelerate at a pace that is far faster than our institutional defensive systems can match. At this point, the nature of security fundamentally changes. It ceases to be preventative and becomes almost entirely reactive.
So they're just playing catch-up.
Exactly. Institutions, whether they are banks, retailers, or governments, are no longer keeping the bad guys out. They are merely doing damage control after the bad guys have already ransacked the building.
But let me play devil's advocate for a second here. When these massive hacks happen, the average consumer might feel a momentary panic. They check their bank account, maybe they have to call and get a new credit card issued. It's a hassle, sure. But society absorbs the blow and moved on. TJ Maxx is still in business. Sony is still selling PlayStations. Is it really a singularity if the system just keeps churning along?
That is the illusion of resilience. The massive hidden costs of these breaches are distributed across the entire system, quietly dragging down the economy and eroding trust. It's not just the raw dollars directly stolen from a checking account. Independent research, such as data compiled by the Ponemon Institute, calculates that companies face an average cost of $188 for each and every record stolen.
Wait, $188 per record. So for the TJ Maxx hack, you multiply $188 by 94 million records.
Exactly. You are looking at billions of dollars in systemic drag. And it manifests in brutal ways. The stock market absolutely punishes these victim firms. Take a payment processing company like Global Payments. When they suffered a major breach, their market valuation was slashed by 9% in a single day.
Wow.
The stock plummeted so fast that the New York Stock Exchange actually had to halt trading of its shares to prevent a total freefall.
So you have the plummeting stock, but then you also have the operational nightmare. Class action lawsuits, the logistical cost of mailing out millions of replacement credit cards, the cost of the credit monitoring services that these companies are forced to provide to the victims for years afterward.
And while the financial damage is massive, the most corrosive cost is the total loss of institutional trust. The entire digital economy relies on a foundational belief that the institutions holding our data can protect it. When that belief is shattered repeatedly, the system becomes incredibly fragile.
But this raises a really crucial pivot point. We have been talking about traditional criminals, the people actively breaking into systems to steal data. However, to really understand this crisis in perception, we also have to examine the legitimate companies we willingly interact with every single day.
Right.
Because the incentive architecture of the legal digital economy has built the exact infrastructure that makes this massive scale of crime possible in the first place.
That's exactly right. The legitimate economy has essentially done the heavy lifting for the criminal underworld by aggregating all the targets into massive, vulnerable silos.
Let's talk about the reality of free services. We all use them. Social media, navigation apps, email platforms, video streaming. But there is a golden rule of the digital age that we often ignore. If you are not paying for the product, you are the product.
You are.
These networks and platforms aren't offering you free email out of the goodness of their hearts. They are extracting a staggering amount of behavioral information from you every second of the day. Why? Because your personal data is highly profitable.
We are operating in an environment that former Vice President Al Gore very accurately dubbed the stalker economy. The businesses you interact with are fundamentally incentivized to capture, aggregate, and monetize your identity, your habits, your location, and your routines. I want to be clear, this isn't a glitch in the system. This is the core business model.
It's the whole point.
Exactly. Data is frequently referred to as the new oil, and just like oil, there is a massive, highly competitive rush to extract it, refine it, and sell it to the highest bidder.
And the companies doing the refining are the data brokers. Now, you, the listener, might be familiar with credit reporting agencies like Equifax or Experian, but there's an entirely different tier of companies out there. Take a company called Axiom. You might have never even heard their name, but I guarantee you they know who you are. Their CEO has proudly announced that they had collected nearly 1.1 billion third-party cookies and had identified and profiled the mobile devices of more than 200 million individual consumers.
Let's clarify what that actually means, because terms like cookies can sound innocuous. A third-party cookie is essentially a tracking tag placed on your browser by a company you didn't even know you were interacting with. So you visit a news website, but the tracking tag belongs to a data broker. As you move from the news site to a shopping site, to a medical forum, to a travel blog, that tag follows you. It builds a comprehensive, multidimensional profile of your interests, your fears, your financial status, your political leanings, and your health concerns.
They are creating incredibly detailed maps of human vulnerability. And what's wild is that we just willingly hand it over. It's not just what we type into a search bar. It's what we say out loud. There are instances where seemingly innocuous actions, like speaking a voice command to a virtual assistant like Siri, result in your voice recordings being analyzed and stored by the company for at least 2 years. The microphone in your pocket is feeding the data machine.
And what's deeply concerning here is the sheer opacity of this industry. Unlike credit reporting agencies, which at least have some regulatory oversight requiring them to correct factual errors if you catch them, modern data brokers operate in a space that is almost entirely unregulated. They harvest public databases, property records, marriage licenses, voting rolls, and aggregate that with the personal information you willingly or unwittingly share on social media.
It's a gold mine.
They're building the most comprehensive intelligence surveillance system in human history, all for the purpose of targeted advertising and behavioral prediction.
Okay, but let me ask the skeptical question. If they are just using it to sell me a better pair of running shoes, why should I care? If Axiom knows I like sci-fi novels and jogging, is that really a threat?
It becomes a threat when we look at the overlap between corporate surveillance and state surveillance. The sheer volume of highly intimate data being stockpiled by the private sector has fundamentally altered how governments and intelligence agencies operate. Think about the economics of it. Why should a government spend billions of taxpayer dollars building a massive, highly controversial surveillance network from scratch when they can simply buy access to the one the corporate world has already built for them?
Oh, wow. So the private sector builds the infrastructure and the state just taps into it.
Exactly. The cost of proxy surveillance, meaning tracking someone not by following them physically, but by tracking their GPS data, their social media check-ins, their phone pings, and their financial transactions, has plummeted. Analysis suggests it now costs roughly $574 per taxpayer to track each and every person in the country. It's pennies an hour.
That reminds me of this brilliant, albeit deeply dark, parody from the Onion News Network. They ran a fake news report a while back claiming that the CIA was shutting down all of its surveillance programs because Facebook was doing the job for them entirely voluntarily.
Right.
The joke was that people were just freely uploading their relationships, their locations, their political affiliations, saving the CIA billions. But the underlying truth of that parody is exactly what makes it resonate so strongly. The boundaries between commercial data harvesting and state-level surveillance are increasingly porous.
And it isn't just major tech giants. The surveillance economy trickles all the way down to the smallest applications.
Yes. So listener, think about the free app sitting on your phone right now. You downloaded a puzzle game or a free flashlight app. Did you ever stop to read the terms of service? Of course not. Nobody does. But what permissions did you grant them when you clicked? Accept. Why does a simple flashlight app need access to your contact list and your GPS location?
The technical answer is it doesn't.
Right. It doesn't need to know where I am to turn on an LED light. It needs those permissions because it is harvesting your data exhaust to sell to those exact data brokers we were just talking about. If a flashlight app tracks your GPS to a cancer clinic twice a week, that data point is incredibly valuable to a health insurance profiler, even if the app developer has no idea who you are.
This creates a profound systemic fragility. Centralizing all of this deeply personal, highly valuable data in insecure corporate databases doesn't just threaten your privacy on a theoretical level, it creates a massive, irresistible target for bad actors. Willie Sutton famously said he robbed banks because that is where the money is. Today, data is where the money is. And by stockpiling it, we have inadvertently created the perfect hunting ground for a new, highly professionalized criminal class.
Which is the perfect pivot. Because we really need to talk about this new criminal class. We need to completely dispel a pervasive almost comforting myth right now. When we say cybercriminal, most people probably picture a lone, pimply teenager in a hoodie sitting in a dark basement, typing furiously at a keyboard while green code rains down the screen.
The Hollywood hacker.
Exactly. That image is dangerously obsolete. Today, cybercrime is a transnational, highly structured, multi-billion-dollar corporate enterprise. Welcome to Crime, Inc.
The demographic shift alone tells the story of how industrialized this has become. Statistical analysis shows that more than 40% of organized cybercriminals are over the age of 35. These are not rebellious teenagers trying to impress their friends. These are career professionals. They are engineers, logisticians, and managers who recognized early on that there was vast wealth to be generated by subverting digital technology.
And there is this incredible analogy used to describe how this ecosystem evolved, referencing the movie Ghostbusters. Remember the primary rule in Ghostbusters: don't cross the streams. Crossing the proton streams was supposed to cause total protonic reversal, a catastrophic event. Well, in the criminal underworld, the streams have officially crossed.
They definitely have.
We are seeing a catastrophic merger between highly talented, geeky digital hackers and traditional, violent, organized crime syndicates. We are talking about the mafia, drug cartels, and massive transnational gangs. The Rand Corporation actually published research finding that a staggering 80% of hackers now work for or alongside organized crime groups.
It is a terrifying synergy. If you think about what a traditional cartel brings to the table, it's vast amounts of capital, ruthless enforcement, and established money laundering networks. But they historically lacked technical sophistication. Hackers, on the other hand, had the technical skills to breach systems globally, but they often lacked the infrastructure to monetize the stolen data safely, or the muscle to enforce their operations.
So they team up.
By merging, they cover each other's weaknesses. A drug cartel can now hire a hacker to infiltrate the Port Authority's logistics database, locate exactly which shipping container has their contraband, and alter the system to show it was already inspected.
That is wild. It's the full industrialization of the underworld, and they operate with sophisticated organizational charts, just like a Fortune 500 company. They use the exact same business models as legitimate Silicon Valley startups. They employ freemium pricing models to lure in new criminal clients. They use crowdsourcing to find vulnerabilities in software. They've even established what is effectively crime as a service.
Crime as a service is a critical evolution. It means you no longer need to be a technical genius to be a cybercriminal. If you want to launch a massive cyber attack but you don't know how to code, you simply go to the dark web and rent the infrastructure, you rent the malware, you rent the server space, you even get 24/7 technical support from the developers if your attack isn't working properly. They have removed the technical friction from committing a felony.
And they are incredibly adept at motivating their workforce. They actually use gamification. There was a website called rankmyhack.com. It was basically a global leaderboard for hackers. They would get points and peer validation for breaking into difficult systems. Hacking a small blog might get you 10 points, but breaching a government server would get you 1,000. They are applying the exact same psychological hooks used in video games to incentivize major international felonies.
And all of this operates within the dark web, utilizing encrypted networks like Tor to mask their physical locations and untraceable digital currencies to maintain absolute financial anonymity. They purchase zero-day exploits, which are undiscovered flaws in software that the creators don't even know exist yet. They buy massive batches of stolen credit card numbers wholesale. It is a fully functioning, frictionless shadow economy operating entirely outside the reach of traditional law enforcement.
But here is where it goes from a highly efficient business model to a weapon of mass disruption. Let's talk about the concept of committing crime automatically. Because of Moore's law and the exponential increase in computing power, criminals don't have to launch attacks manually anymore. They use botnets.
Botnets are the engine of modern cyber warfare.
Let's break that down for the listener. Imagine your laptop right now. Use it to check email and watch movies. But unbeknownst to you, you clicked a bad link a year ago and a tiny piece of malware was installed. Your computer still works fine, but it is now a zombie computer. A botnet is a network of thousands or even millions of these zombie computers, all silently waiting for a command from a central server controlled by a criminal. Your laptop could be part of a botnet right now without you having any idea.
And the criminals lease out the processing power of this massive distributed network to automate extortion or launch distributed denial of service, or DDoS, attacks.
Let's use an analogy for a DDoS attack. Imagine a popular local restaurant that can seat 50 people. A DDoS attack is the equivalent of a criminal hiring 10,000 people to show up at the restaurant at the exact same time, crowding the doorway, filling the parking lot, and completely blocking all the legitimate customers from getting inside.
The restaurant is paralyzed.
Exactly. In the digital world, the botnet sends millions of simultaneous requests to a target website, say, a major bank, overwhelming the servers until the site completely crashes. Then the criminals send a message saying, pay us $50,000 in crypto or your bank stays offline.
And the scale of these botnets is difficult to overstate. There was a specific tool for sale in the digital underground known as Storm.bot 2.0. This single zombie network was available to rent for a mere $3,000. For that small investment, a buyer could command a botnet capable of generating 300 gigabytes per second of attack traffic.
That's insane.
To put that in perspective, that is enough digital brute force to knock the entire internet infrastructure of a small nation-state completely offline.
Knocking a country offline for $3,000. That is the definition of asymmetrical warfare. The leverage is unimaginable. But while Crime, Inc. is busy targeting our data in the cloud and knocking websites offline, our own human psychology is opening up an entirely new and arguably more dangerous vulnerability. We have developed a blind, almost religious trust in what we see on our screens, and that trust is opening up physical vulnerabilities that are terrifying.
We're transitioning into a mediated reality. We increasingly experience the physical world through the filter of our digital devices. If the GPS on our dashboard says turn left, we turn left, even if there is no road. If a stock ticker on a trading floor says a company's value is crashing, algorithms automatically sell millions of shares. If a medical monitor in an ICU says a patient's heart rate is dropping, a nurse administers powerful drugs, we implicitly trust the screen. But the fundamental danger is this. If an adversary controls the code feeding the data to that screen, they effectively control your physical reality.
There used to be an old computer science saying garbage in, garbage out, meaning if you put bad data into a system, you get bad results.
But the paradigm has shifted. As our dependency has grown, it has become garbage in, gospel out. We no longer question the output.
I have to share this story about the Washington, D.C. electronic voting pilot, because it highlights this specific vulnerability perfectly. A few years ago, D.C. was testing a new online voting system. To their credit, before taking it live for a real election, they bravely invited white hat hackers, the good guys, to try and break into it and test the security. Enter a team of researchers from the University of Michigan.
And we should note this wasn't a minor superficial breach.
No, it was total, humiliating domination. Within 48 hours of the system going live for testing, the Michigan team took full control of the Board of Elections server. They could see how every single test user voted, completely destroying the concept of ballot secrecy. But they didn't just passively observe, they actively changed the votes. They manipulated the system to elect Bender, the cynical, cigar-smoking robot from the cartoon Futurama, as the school board president by an overwhelming landslide.
Which is deeply funny, but the implications are profoundly serious.
Oh, and it gets better. Or worse, depending on how you look at it. As a final calling card to prove they had total control of the architecture, the hackers altered the underlying software so that every time a voter clicked submit, the computer would aggressively play the University of Michigan fight song. And the ultimate punchline. The district officials running the test had absolutely no idea they were hacked.
They missed it completely.
They were completely oblivious, until 2 days later, when an elderly voter called City Hall. She didn't call to complain that her computer was playing music. She called to compliment them on the new system, saying she loved the little patriotic song that played after she voted. She completely trusted the interface on her screen, totally unaware her vote had just been intercepted and assigned to a cartoon robot.
That anecdote is amusing because the stakes were low and the hackers are researchers. But if we shift that exact same vulnerability, the blind trust in a compromised screen, to our critical infrastructure, the humor vanishes immediately. Much of the world's critical infrastructure, our power grids, our water treatment plants, our natural gas pipelines, our public transportation networks, rely on what are called SCADA systems.
Okay, let's explain SCADA for the listener. What exactly is a SCADA system?
SCADA stands for Supervisory Control and Data Acquisition. Think of it as the digital brain that controls heavy physical machinery. It is the computer that tells a valve at a dam to open, or tells a centrifuge at a nuclear plant to spin faster, or tells a railroad switch to change tracks. These systems were built decades ago, in an era before the global internet existed. They were designed to operate on isolated, closed networks, just automatically monitoring and adjusting physical equipment based on simple commands.
And because they were closed loops, nobody really worried about cybersecurity.
Yeah.
You couldn't hack them unless you physically broke into the power plant and plugged a computer directly into the wall.
Exactly. But over the last 2 decades, in the pursuit of administrative efficiency and remote management, we have increasingly connected these outdated, highly insecure SCADA systems directly to the internet. An engineer wants to be able to monitor the water pressure from their laptop at home, so they connect the plant to the web. The result is a disaster waiting to happen. The architecture was never designed for an open network. Studies have shown that nearly 70% of critical infrastructure companies suffered a security breach that led to a loss of confidential information or an actual disruption of operations in a single 12-month period.
Let me just repeat that, 70%. We're talking about the systems that purify the drinking water coming out of your tap, the systems that keep the lights on in hospitals.
And this leads directly to the terrifying reality of modern information warfare and military deception. Since the days of Sun Tzu, warfare has been based on deception, tricking the enemy about your numbers or your location. But today, the battlefield is the screen. Military commanders rely entirely on digital screens to tell them the location of their troops, the trajectory of incoming missiles, and the status of their supply lines. If a sophisticated nation-state adversary can hack those systems and alter the data undetected, showing friendly troops as enemy combatants, or showing an empty patch of ocean as a carrier strike group, the results aren't just a compromised credit card or a stolen password. The results are fatal. It is the ultimate fog of war, generated artificially by compromised code.
And if you were listening to this and thinking, well, that sounds like a big nation-state problem for the Pentagon that doesn't really affect my daily life, well, hold on to your hats, because this physical vulnerability, the bridging of the digital and the real world, is about to multiply exponentially right inside your house. We are moving beyond connecting just computers and industrial infrastructure. We are rushing headlong into the Internet of Things, or IoT.
This is a monumental shift in the attack surface.
Soon, if not already, every household appliance, every car, every thermostat, and every light bulb will have an IP address and a Wi-Fi connection. We are voluntarily expanding the attack surface directly into our most private physical spaces.
The push for the Internet of Things is driven by the exact same misaligned incentives we discussed earlier, the promise of consumer convenience and the massive profitability of granular data extraction. If your refrigerator is connected to the Internet, it can tell you when you are out of milk, which is convenient. But it also tells a data broker exactly what you eat and when you open the door, which is profitable. But as the analysis warns, while connecting everything might have tremendous value, connecting everything insecurely does not. We are assigning IP addresses to billions of highly hackable, cheaply made objects.
Let's look at how this interconnected vulnerability plays out in the real world. Think back to the massive Target data breach we mentioned earlier. Tens of millions of credit cards stolen. Do you know how the hackers actually got into Target's highly secure billion-dollar corporate network? They didn't hack Target directly, they hacked the air conditioning.
It is the perfect example of systemic fragility.
Target, like many massive corporations, outsourced its heating and cooling to a third-party vendor. In this case, a small company called Fazio Mechanical Services. Fazio needed a connection to Target's network to remotely monitor the temperatures in the stores and adjust the thermostats. The hackers recognized that Target's direct defenses were too strong, so they looked for a side door. They targeted the small HVAC company, which had far weaker security. They compromised Fazio, stole their vendor login credentials, used those credentials to walk right into Target's main network through the thermostat connection, and hit the motherlode. When everything is connected, your entire security apparatus is only as strong as the weakest smart thermostat on your network.
And that is the enterprise level. When we bring the Internet of Things down to the personal level, it represents the total obliteration of privacy. Consider the smart meter on your house. Utility companies love them because they don't have to send a worker to read the dial anymore. It beams the data continuously. But if your home is equipped with a smart meter, it is not just reading abstract kilowatts, it is reading the distinct electrical signature of every appliance.
Wait, really? It can tell the difference between a TV and a microwave?
Yes. A refrigerator draws power differently than a plasma television, which draws power differently than a medical oxygen concentrator. So the smart meter is constantly transmitting a granular narrative of your daily life when you wake up, when you cook, when you watch TV, when you go to sleep. And if that meter reports an anomaly, police or authorities can deduce behavior inside the home without ever looking in a window. There have been instances where unusually high electrical bills triggered search warrants because police suspected indoor marijuana grow operations.
But someone listening might say, well, if you aren't growing illegal drugs, you have nothing to hide.
That is the classic but deeply flawed defense of surveillance. The issue isn't about hiding crimes. It is about the systemic erosion of the Fourth Amendment and the expectation of privacy in your own home. The smart meter essentially bypassed the need for traditional probable cause and physical surveillance. You are generating the evidence against yourself just by turning on the lights.
And it is not just happening in our homes. It is being forced upon our children in schools. The drive for administrative efficiency is turning students into nodes on the Internet of Things. In Contra Costa County, California, preschoolers, coddlers, were required to wear basketball-style jerseys with built-in electronic tracking devices so administrators knew their exact physical location at all times. In San Antonio, a high school sophomore named Andrea Hernandez was actually suspended and faced expulsion because she refused to wear an RFID tracking badge on campus. The school argued it needed the data to maximize state attendance funding. We are literally normalizing persistent physical surveillance for the next generation for the sake of administrative bookkeeping.
Which brings us to perhaps the most intimate and disturbing frontier of this entire crisis: behaviometrics and biological hacking. The line between the machine and the human is dissolving. We are actively integrating our biology with information technology. And this goes far beyond using your thumbprint to unlock your phone.
Yeah, the technology being developed right now sounds like incredible utopian sci-fi. Until you remember who we are dealing with. The sources detail devices like the NIMI wristband. Instead of a password, this wristband reads the unique electrocardiac rhythm of your heartbeat. Your heartbeat becomes the key to unlock your digital devices, open your smart home, and start your car.
And even more invasive is the technology developed by companies like Proteus Digital Health. They created a microchip pill that you actually swallow. It doesn't have a battery. It is powered by the natural galvanic reaction of your stomach acid. Once activated, it broadcasts a unique 18-bit signal from inside your body to a patch on your skin, which relays it to your smartphone. Your entire biological body literally becomes an authentication token.
So why is this so terrifying? If it's my heartbeat, nobody can steal it, right? It's the ultimate password.
That is exactly the misperception. If we make our physical bodies part of the information grid, we are subjecting our very biology to the crime singularity. Criminals won't just hack your laptop, they will hack you. Remember, digital data can always be intercepted, spoofed, or replicated. If a hacker intercepts the biometric signature of your heartbeat, they have your password forever. You can reset a stolen password on your email. You cannot reset your heartbeat.
And it goes beyond just stealing a password. If a medical implant, like a pacemaker or an insulin pump, is connected to the internet for remote monitoring by a doctor, it can be accessed by a malicious actor. A hacker could theoretically send a command to dump a lethal dose of insulin or trigger a cardiac event. The attack surface is no longer just digital or financial. It is visceral. It is life and death. So, listener, let me ask you to do one more thing for me. Look around the room you are sitting in right now. How many smart devices are sitting there with you? Your smart TV, your voice-activated speaker, your smartwatch, maybe even your connected refrigerator. Are you absolutely 100% sure their microphones and cameras are truly off? Because as we have seen, if they are connected, they are vulnerable.
This paints an undeniably grim picture. We have outlined a system that seems destined for catastrophic failure. But we cannot stop at diagnosis. We have to ask, how do we survive this crisis in perception, where systemic insecurity has been normalized by design? How do we survive our own progress?
Exactly. We can't just throw all our electronics in the ocean and go live in a cave. This brings us to Section 6, Surviving Progress. And it is all about intentionally designing a digital immune system. Because the way we are doing it now is totally fundamentally broken. We are currently expecting you, the everyday individual, to perfectly manage your own cyber hygiene, to remember 100 complex passwords, to identify sophisticated phishing emails, to constantly update firmware in an environment that was explicitly built to extract your data and ignore your security. It is an impossible ask.
The fundamental solution requires looking at the system as a whole and aligning the economic incentives. History actually gives us a perfect parallel for how to fix this. We must treat software liability exactly like we treated automobile safety in the 1960s.
Okay, walk me through that. What happened with cars in the 60s?
Before the passage of the National Traffic and Motor Vehicle Safety Act of 1966, car manufacturers faced very little consequence for building deadly, dangerous vehicles. Cars didn't have seatbelts, they didn't have shatterproof glass, the steering columns would impale drivers in a crash. The manufacturers argued that safety features were too expensive and that accidents were simply the fault of bad drivers. There was no economic incentive to spend money on safety. But consumer advocacy, led by figures like Ralph Nader, and subsequent legislation changed the equation. They made the manufacturers legally and financially liable for negligent design. Suddenly, safety became a competitive business necessity.
But look at the software industry today. It is the exact opposite. When you download a new program or an app, a box pops up asking you to click Agree on an End-User License Agreement, a EULA. Now, nobody reads them. They are 100 pages of legalese. But do you know what they actually say? They legally absolve the software company of absolutely all damage caused by their own crappy code. If you buy a piece of accounting software and it is full of security holes and a hacker exploits it and bankrupts your business, that software company owes you absolutely nothing. They are entirely shielded from liability.
And until that changes, the system will not improve. Until companies face severe financial liability for massive breaches caused by their own negligence and rushed development cycles, they will continue to prioritize speed to market and profit margins over security. The business costs of releasing persistently broken, vulnerable code must become greater than the cost of fixing the vulnerabilities in the first place. That is the only way the balance of incentives will tip.
But wait, let me play the skeptic again. If we suddenly make Microsoft or Apple legally liable every time a hacker finds a tiny loophole in millions of lines of code, doesn't that just destroy the tech industry? Won't innovation just grind to an absolute halt because companies will be too terrified of lawsuits to release anything new?
That is the industry's primary defense, but it is a false dichotomy. We aren't talking about punishing a developer for a minor, unforeseen bug. We are talking about establishing basic standards of negligent architecture. If a car company builds a brake line out of cheap plastic to save a penny and it snaps, they are liable for the negligence. Similarly, if a software company stores 10 million user passwords in plain text without basic encryption, which happens constantly, that is not a bug. That is gross negligence, and they should be held accountable.
Okay, that makes sense. So beyond the legal and financial incentives, there are also some incredible cutting-edge technological solutions being proposed. And my favorite concept in this entire analysis is biomimicry. Looking to nature, which has had millions of years of evolution to solve complex problems, and applying those solutions to human systems. There is this fascinating work by a computer science professor named Aaron Fulp, who created the concept of digital ants.
It is a brilliant, paradigm-shifting approach to network security. Currently, our cyber defense methodology is archaic. It is like building a massive, tall, medieval wall around a city and hoping no one figures out how to climb over it. But as we know, static firewalls are completely useless when the threat is already inside the perimeter. Fulp looked at how insect colonies, specifically ants, use swarming intelligence to protect their territory. Instead of one massive, dumb firewall, you deploy thousands of tiny digital ants.
So what exactly is a digital ant?
It is a small, autonomous software program. You deploy a swarm of them to constantly roam across a computer network, moving from node to node, server to server.
And when one of these digital ants finds a threat, like a piece of malware or an unauthorized user, it doesn't just try to fight it alone. It leaves a virtual scent trail. Now, in computer terms, that scent trail is actually a tiny string of code, a specific alert tag left on the infected server node. As other digital ants roam nearby, they scan for that tag. If they read it, they move toward the infection and layer their own tags on top of it. Stronger scent trails bring more and more ants until they automatically swarm the anomaly, isolating and neutralizing the infection without a human system administrator ever having to intervene or even know what was happening until it is over.
It transforms a static, brittle defense into a dynamic, self-healing network. It is the foundation of a true digital immune system. And this localized biological approach scales perfectly into a massive global concept, the creation of a cyber CDC, a Centers for Disease Control for the Internet.
I love this idea. If you look at how real-world epidemiologists fought global diseases like malaria, they didn't just sit in hospitals and treat the patients who were already sick. They went after the source of the infection, they mapped the outbreaks, and they drained the physical swamps where the malaria-carrying mosquitoes bred.
A cyber CDC would operate on the exact same principles, using digital epidemiology. Instead of just giving consumers antivirus software, this international body would track the spread of malware across the globe and coordinate efforts between governments and ISPs to actively drain the swamps of the internet, taking down the botnet command and control servers, blocking the rogue hosting providers that breed digital disease, and neutralizing the infrastructure of Crime Inc. at its source.
And the best part is, we don't just have to wait for the government to do this. We, the public, can actually help. There's this amazing concept of crowdsourcing our defense. We have seen this work in the medical field with online games like Malaria Spot and Fold It.
Those are incredible examples of utilizing human capital.
All right. In these games, regular people with absolutely zero medical training log on to play what look like simple puzzle games. But the puzzles are actually visualizations of real scientific data. Malaria Spot players, just by clicking on anomalies in images on their phones, were actually diagnosing real blood samples for malaria with 99% accuracy. The collective intelligence of gamers matched the accuracy of trained pathologists. And Fold It players actually mapped the complex 3D structure of an HIV-related enzyme in just a few days, a problem that had stumped the world's most powerful supercomputers for a decade.
The human brain is still the greatest pattern recognition engine in the world. Now imagine applying that gamification to our digital grid. Imagine mobilizing the public through interactive bug bounties and visual phishing detection games, rewarding everyday people for spotting malicious code, identifying fake domains, or flagging vulnerabilities in critical infrastructure. It fundamentally transforms the public from passive, helpless victims waiting to be hacked into an active, crowdsourced defense mechanism.
Which brings us to the final synthesis of our deep dive today. We have covered a massive amount of ground. We've explored how Moore's law supercharges criminal capabilities. We've mapped the surveillance economy and the terrifying rise of data brokers. We've looked at the industrialization of Crime Inc., the fragile vulnerabilities of trusting our screens, and the intimate physical threats posed by the Internet of Things and biometric hacking.
If we pull all of these threads together, the overarching lesson of this analysis is this. We are currently caught in a profound crisis of perception. We are expecting the individual to manage cyber hygiene in a macro environment they did not design, an environment where the core incentives actively work against their security. What looks like frictionless progress for users has become massive, unearned leverage for criminals, states, and markets at an exponential scale. To survive our own progress, we must stop treating security as an afterthought. We must demand systemic resilience, aligned economic incentives through software liability, and a level of coordinated public-private cooperation that is akin to a Manhattan Project for cyber. The clock is ticking, and the foundation of our digital civilization is currently built on sand.
But before we sign off, I want to leave you, the listener, with one final unmentioned thought to ponder, something to mull over on your own as you look at your smartphone today. We just talked about the promise of building these incredible, autonomous, AI-driven digital immune systems, like the digital ant systems that can self-heal, analyze threats, and police our networks at light speed to protect us from the overwhelming scale of Crime Inc. But here is the provocative question. If we successfully build those autonomous self-policing systems, do we risk locking ourselves out of our own infrastructure? In our desperate quest to secure the digital system from human criminals, do we ultimately surrender the keys of civilization entirely to the machines?
It is a profound and necessary question.
Crisis in Perception examines how systems shape belief and how better tools help us see clearly.
This project is free and publicly accessible. If you'd like to support the time, tools, and research behind Crisis in Perception, you can become a supporter on Patreon.
For a shorter visual overview of this topic, see the mini explainer linked in the description.
If you enjoy this kind of systems-level analysis, please like, subscribe, and comment with books or topics you'd like us to explore next.